Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy was kidnapped, child of Big Mom, and trained with Garp to learn all 3 Haki part 2. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Psychotic-Tomato for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Summary: reunion between older brothers and reunion between other siblings apparently. List of Charlottes in this chapter because there's a lot of them: smoothie, flamp, pudding, brownie, cracker, amand, katakuri, brulee. Previously. Beers. We won't meet in days, we will meet each other again in years. Everything else he did was a distraction to hide the real message from everyone else. This message was meant for us. It's the decision that Luffy made. There's no point in rushing, Luffy could take on the new world, but us? We won't stand a chance there. Zoro narrowed his eyes as he continues on. We'll stop here and increase our strength. And then we'll set sail once more. Present. Chapter. At the place where Whitebeard was buried. When Luffy left, the Whitebeard pirates were going to stay a little longer before setting off too. Right now Ace was lying on the grass hill with a newspaper in hand, while his hat was laying right next to him. The Sabo. Would you look at that, our little brother is stronger than us as always, he even beat admirals and castrated that bastard who disrespected Oyaji. Picking up his hat and standing up, he muttered to himself. Watch over him, will you, Sabo? Marco. There's a random person at Oyaji's grave. Ace tensed and was surprised, who the hell was here? Did he come to pay respects? He ran towards his father's grave and saw a figure. He was wearing a cloak that covered everything. He turned around noticing his presence, his cloak also obscuring his face. Marco and the others had came towards him and were behind him, they were also tense and wary of the unknown man. Who are you? What business do you have on this island? Ace asks, glaring at the figure with his guard up. He took off his cloak and looked at Ace with a soft smile. It's me, Ace. Ace was surprised when he saw his face. No, it can't be, he died. We shared a bottle of sake and we 3 became brothers. Ace was surprised but shook his head in denial. It can't be. He now was narrowing his eyes at him. How do you know that? Of course, I would know. I'm your brother after all. Ace had hope in his eyes. Was it him? Sabo? Yo, Ace. It was. With that, Ace ran towards Sabo, who opened his arms expecting a hug. It's been a long time, has Bonk. But got punched in the face instead. His ship brothers went from stunned at the fact that Ace had another brother besides Luffy to dumbstruck when he punched him. Ace grabbed his collar and shook him furiously. Long time no see, my ass. Where the hell have you been these past years? Sabo started looking sheepish. Sorry. When that celestial dragon shot me, I had amnesia. Ace stopped shaking him. Amnesia? Ace tilted his head in confusion at that while Sabo nodded. Yeah, amnesia. Sabo, noticing his confusion, put it in more simpler terms. I lost all my memories until I heard about the war. Ace let go of Sabo. Oh, but still, could you have remembered me earlier? Luffy cried because of you, because we. Ace started crying a bit, which startled the Whitebeards. They never seen him cry. We thought you died. Sabo pulled him into a hug. Yeah, sorry, I'm back. They stayed like that for a few moments before Marco interrupted them. As much as heartwarming as this is, what the hell is going on? Who are you? They both let go of each other and Sabo turned and gave a 2-finger salute. I'm Sabo. The staff chief of the revolutionary. Nice to meet you. Oh, that's nice, Ace said towards Sabo as if it wasn't a big deal. Staff chief of revolutionary. Sabo explained to the Whitebeard pirates of his past, how he got shot by a celestial dragon and saved by dragon and got amnesia, how he joined the revolutionary, and how he regained the memories. That must have been rough, Marco said to Sabo, with his brothers also feeling sympathetic for Sabo, who was presumed dead for so long. He only regained his memories because someone mentioned Ace in the newspaper. If he hadn't, he probably would have known later, and they wouldn't have Ace reunited with Sabo like this because they would have sailed off by then. Sabo nodded towards Marco. Yeah, it was. Sabo turned to Ace with a look of guilt. Sorry, Ace wasn't there to save you with Luffy. Ace just chopped his head. Idiot. How could you do anything if you had no memories of us? And besides, at least you're alive. Sabo smiled at that. Yeah. He then remembered and asked. Ace, where's Luffy? Ah, he went with Rayleigh. Kuma had separated him from his crew. When he freed me, he decided that he would reunite with his crew in years. Years? Yeah, so they could prepare themselves and train for the new world. Luffy could take it on, but his crew can't. Is that so? Do you know where he is? Amazon Lily. Sabo smiled at this. Do you know where the place is? Nope. Sabo blinked. Hey. You don't? Nope. Sabo now just deadpanned. Huh. But I got Rayleigh's contact so we could contact him from the Den Mushy where the island is, Ace said. Just as Luffy, Jinbei and Rayleigh were about to leave, Rayleigh gave him his contact in order to call him if he wanted to talk to Luffy to know how he was doing. Sabo let out a big sigh of relief at this, he didn't have to reunite with him after years. That would have been really awkward. At Autoland, Big Mom's office. Right now, Big Mom was in her throne room going through paperwork, being the queen and ruling over several islands was rough. Fortunately, due to her wanting to change for the better, she had also started to collect the souls of only citizens who have committed a crime. She still had taken large number of souls via foolish marines, pirates, criminals who dared and tried to attack her land, sending her children to deal with and bring back any survivors to drain them off their souls, and sometimes going out herself. She had also sent her forces to claim Fishman Island. Since Whitebeard's death, this was the perfect opportunity to strike. She may have seen him as a drinking buddy, but she wasn't that close to him, and besides, she's a pirate. And speak of the devil, as Tamago appeared before her, hopefully for what she wanted. Tamago, I swear to God if it's something not related to Luffy or Fishman Island. Big Mom trailed off while looking at him. That dared it to be not urgent or important. Paperwork was stressful as hell, especially with how many islands she had conquered and had to deal with. Tamago gulped before speaking up. Straw Hat Luffy has been sighted in Marineford. Big Mom raised her eyebrow at that. Why did he go to Marineford again? Tamago, where did you heard about this? It's in today's newspaper on the front page. Tamago said as he showed her the newspaper in front of her. She took it and squinted her eyes and saw the picture of her son, who seems to be showing respect. Tamago. Gather all my children around the meeting room. Big Mom ordered. Yes, Mama. At Autoland, meeting room. Big Mom sat and waited for her children to come, and way they all came, Prim strolling Praline in a giant bowl on a trolley and settled down. She immediately cut to the chase. We have found a lead on Luffy. Tamago present the information. The Charlottes now shifted their interest toward said man. Yes. In the newspaper today, Straw Hat Luffy has appeared in Marineford. He had appeared before them with the Sea Knight, Jinbei. And along with the first mate of Roger, Dark King, Silver's Rayleigh. Why was Roger's first mate with Luffy? Smoothie asked, widening her eyes at the mention of his name before narrowing. Why was someone like him with his baby brother? It isn't stated anywhere for his reasonings. But when Luffy was there, he had rung the ox bell and proceeded to throw a banquet of flowers and showed his respect, which is the picture you see now. As Tamago said this, an image of Luffy projected onto the screen. He was standing with his eyes closed, holding his hat to the chest. The siblings looked at it for a couple of seconds until Pudding looked closely at the image with all of her eyes. There was something on his arm. She muttered. Flampu was sitting next to her, heard what she said and questioned her. You found something in the image? Now all of her siblings were looking at her, and she closed her right eye at that. She turned and nodded at Flampia. She looked at all of her siblings before pointing at Luffy's right arm. His right arm has dye tattooed on it. At this they followed where she was pointing and noticed it also. He is crossed out, but why isn't a man, muttered Well, rubbing her chin deep in thought along with her siblings. Tamago. Are there any other leads? Big Mom asked him. They had been thinking and rubbing their heads for a while, but couldn't come to a conclusion. When they get him back, they will get him to explain behind the meaning. Yes. Our spy, who was amongst the Whitebeards at his funeral, had taken a submarine and observed Luffy from a distance when he later boarded the warlord Boa Hancock's ship. Boa Hancock? One the male siblings questioned with a hint of jealousy. Actually, most of the males were jealous of hearing how it seemed their brother was acquainted with such a beauty. Tamago nodded at that. Smoothie crossed her legs and came with the most reasonable conclusion possible, so he should be on Amazon Lily. The country of woman, Lucky Brownie muttered with jealousy, his brother's also thinking the same thing as him. It will take a while for us to reach Thereven, so there's no guarantee. Cracker trailed off. But it's our only lead. Big Mom finished her son's sentence for him, but even so, we can't let this opportunity slip by. Big Mom looked at her children, thinking about who would be best before she landed her eyes on of her oldest children. Hatakuri, Amanda and Brule. You will be tasked with bringing back Luffy. Said individuals responded and smiled at this. Yes, Mama. Good. All of you are dismissed. Wait for them to report if they find your brother. Yes, Mama. At Amazon Lily. Jinbei halfway through the journey had business to attend to, so with a hug and a farewell he left. After docking, they took a stroll deep into the forest with Boa Hancock, showing concern for her love interest, which Rayleigh waved off, saying he would be fine. Right now, Rayleigh was walking with Luffy going deeper in the forest. While walking, Rayleigh asked Luffy about something that has been bugging him for a while. Luffy-kun, why is it that your observation is weak, but your armament and conquerors isn't? Luffy just shrugged at this. I didn't learn much about it, except Shanks told me you could detect attacks with it, and also I didn't know how to train it. That's so. After stopping after a couple minutes of walking, Rayleigh demonstrated what observation Haki is when a giant red elephant came and swung at him, but he dodged it. Better to train from scratch to see how much he knows. After that he blindfolded Luffy and took a couple of swings at him before his den mushy started to ring. "Who is this?" "Yo, it's me, Ace." Rayleigh and Luffy peeked at this Ace. "Why are you calling?" "Luffy is alright and is training right now if you're wondering." Rayleigh questioned him. He did say to call him if he wanted to know about Luffy's well-being. "No, it's nothing like that, actually there's a very important person that wants to meet him in person." Rayleigh raised an eyebrow at that. "Ah, is that so? You don't know where Amazon Lily is, don't you?" He noticed how the mushy started to look sheepish. "Yeah." After Rayleigh told him where Amazon Lily is at, Luffy training was paused so he could meet this important person, which Luffy was wondering who it was. After waiting on the shore, they saw a ship coming with Ace waving at them, and behind him was a figure wearing a cloak. After landing, Ace greeted Luffy and asked him how he was doing, before remembering why he came here. "Oh yeah? Luffy." "What?" "The person behind him. You should know him." At this, Luffy looked behind Ace and saw the figure approaching this. At this, Ace moved aside smiling. Luffy tilted his hat at the person. "I know you. Who are you?" The figure took off his cloth and raised his head smiling. "It's me, Luffy." At this, Luffy was confused. "What do you mean it's me? Can't you recognize your own brother?" Luffy tilted his head at this. "Brother? Listen, the only who can call me brother is," he pointed at Ace. "And the guy who died much earlier." Sabo took off his hat so he could get a better look. "He died?" Luffy's eyes started to become watery. He let out a few tears before his eyes popped out and was gaping. It couldn't be, he looked like. He gasped at the resemblance. "Sabo?" He moved backwards and hit a tree and slumped down before getting back up, looking at him angrily. "I don't believe you." At this, Sabo closed one eye and smiled wider. "We stole a bottle of sake from Dayton and made a toast." Luffy was stunned. It had to be him. Who else besides Sabo and Ace would know? Looking at Ace for confirmation, he nodded while smiling. He looked back at Sabo. He stretched his arms and clung to him like a koala and cried. He was alive. He was alive. "What the where have you been all this time? Ace and I thought you were dead." "I'm sorry, Luffy, I had amnesia." After crying for a bit and also bringing Ace to hug him also, he tilted his head at Sabo. "What's amnesia? Can I eat it?" At this, Sabo snorted. "Same old Luffy." Rayleigh coughed to get their attention. "So, who are you?" Sabo looked at Rayleigh and smiled. "I'm Sabo. Chief of Staff of the Revolutionaries. And also Ace and Luffy's brother." Luffy tilted his head at that Chief of Staff. "It means he's really strong like me," Ace replied. "Oh, okay." Rayleigh widened his eyes. "Really?" He looked at Ace and Luffy, who nodded. "Why didn't you tell me?" "It's a long story," Ace said. "I have the time to listen." And so Ace started to explain to Rayleigh about what happened. Rayleigh learned about who Sabo is and what had happened to him. He gave a sad smile toward Sabo. "That must have been horrible." Sabo nodded, frowning. He won't let it happen again." Sabo then looked at Luffy sheepishly with guilt clear on his face. "Also sorry I wasn't there to help." Luffy just blinked and beamed at him. "It's okay. Ace is alive. And besides, you're here with us too." Sabo smiled at Luffy for that. He was quick to forgive, and he was right. All of them are alive. "What are you going to do now?" Luffy asked him. Apparently Sabo works for his father, who told Sabo to say hi for him, which Luffy responded by saying, "Say hi to dad for me," back to Sabo, to which he nodded at. "I'm going to stay in the revolutionary to rebel against the government," Sabo said. But that said, all brothers gave one final group hug and waved farewell. Ace sailed off with Sabo so he could get back to his boat to sail back to his base, while he was going to sail with his ship brothers into the new world. Sabo, when he goes back to base, was going to continue things as per normal and fight against the government. He did leave feeling the guilt wash away as both of his brothers forgive him, although Luffy was quick to forgive people easily, as long as he could see a shred of good in them. Meanwhile, Luffy will train with Rayleigh, mainly focusing on his weak point, which is observation Haki. He needed to be able to detect and predict attacks, so someone like Kuma wouldn't blindside him again. After going back to the forest, he put Luffy on blindfolds and made him fight a huge blue gorilla and the elephant that attack him. Twin jet pistols. Leaping down, he took off his blindfold and smiled. "Alright." Turning to Rayleigh, he asked about his performance. "So, how was that, Rayleigh? Don't get ahead of yourselves, you only just completed the first step." He picked up a club and slumped it on his shoulder. "Next, I'll be your opponent." Whack. Ouch. After that, he was relentlessly hit in the head a day while meeting up with the animals and somehow communicating with them to also hit him with his blindfolds on to train even further. Slowly he was improving. After a few days, Rayleigh was walking around Luffy with a blindfold on and several bumps on his head from hitting him with a Haki-coated club. When Rayleigh took a couple of swings, he was able to dodge. Are you able to sense things? I don't quite get it. You've dodged a consecutive attacks now. You are learning fast but still got a while to go. Luffy really was surprised by the speed of how fast his learning. Snap. Whack. Rayleigh had snapped on a twig, which got Luffy distracted and a hit to the head for that. You got distracted by the noise. Damn it. Luffy was pretty infuriated, but he understood it wasn't going to be easy with how weak his observation was right now. I guess it'll still be a while until you can dodge times. Growl. Rayleigh just laughed at Luffy's hunger. You better hurry up or you'll die of hunger. He motivated Luffy. Luffy was drooling at the reminder of food. Don't remind me of food. Alright, let's continue. Yeah. Luffy trained by dodging hits from Rayleigh at day while dodging animals who also helped him train by night. He slowly was getting better at dodging his hits. Until one day, a ship that looked like cake came sailing towards them. 3 people were talking amongst themselves. You think our little brother is on this island? Only one way to find out. Wait for us, Luffy. Meanwhile with Rayleigh, with his observation Haki, he frowned at who he detected. Looks like we got company. What do the Big Mom pirates want? Luffy took his blindfold off his and looked at Rayleigh. What's wrong? Rayleigh turned to Luffy with a serious look. Be on guard. Big Mom's children are coming. Luffy turned serious and tense. Enemies? Rayleigh nodded and explained further. When we sailed with Roger, we snuck into Big Mom's island and took a rubbing of her poneglyph. She did not like our captain at all. Rayleigh started walking out of the forest along with Luffy. He told him to hide behind a bush or a tree while he dealt with them. Standing on shore, arms crossed, glaring at the ship approaching, he prepared for a fight. What do they want? When they dropped anchor, the people came forward and walked up to Rayleigh with every distance covered, making the situation more tense and tense. Rayleigh was on guard and wary, ready to throw hands if necessary. What do the Big Mom pirates want here? The tall man with the scarf came forward to defuse the situation. Relax, we aren't here to harm you or have any hostile intentions. We are here to find Straw Hat Luffy. It's a personal matter. Rayleigh wasn't really convinced by what this man was saying. Who are you anyway? I'm Katakuri, these are my sisters, Bruley and Amand. What personal matter do you have with Luffy-kun? Relax, when we mean personal, we mean a family-related matter. At that Rayleigh raised an eyebrow, but before he could say anything, Luffy had popped out of the bush, tilting his head at them. Family? Who are you guys? Rayleigh mentally face-palmed. Luffy can be kind of a fool sometimes. When they saw Luffy, they widened their eyes before giving a soft gentle look at him. Finally. They found him. Bruley, not able to stand still, charged towards Luffy. Rayleigh mentally cursed, shit. But before he could do anything, he was stunned, thinking she would attack him. She hugged him and cried heavily. Thank God you were okay. She cried while hugging him. Katakuri and Amand walked forward behind Bruley. Amand had a shiny glint in her eyes while patting Bruley's shoulder to comfort her, while getting a good look at Luffy and smiling warmly at him. Katakuri also did the same to Bruley's other shoulder and ruffled Luffy's hair. His eyes were soft, but his whole facial expression was hard to read properly with his scarf blocking his mouth. Luffy, confused by their sudden display of affection, pushed them away while raising his arms up. Who are you guys? Bruley answered him, smiling warmly while wiping the tears away. You probably don't remember us, you were just a newborn baby at that time. Luffy tilted his head. You know me? Of course we do. After all, we are your older siblings. Chapter. Luffy was gaping at these tall people who proclaimed that they were his older siblings. The older siblings? No way. I only shared a cup of sake with Sabo and Ace. Katakuri stepped forward and explained slowly, we are your blood-related siblings from your mother's side. Luffy tilted his head at this. Mother? I have a mom? They winced at this. He hasn't been told about who she was. The man nodded. Yeah, which makes us your older siblings. Luffy just nodded and beamed at that. He had other siblings besides Ace and Sabo. Okay. The 3 Charlotte sweat dropped at that. He sure is quick to accept. Rayleigh, who had been watching from the sidelines, was stunned and shocked from the revelation. Big Mom is Luffy's mother? Bruley nodded towards Rayleigh. Yeah, when he was born, he was stolen from us by Dragon. She explained while scowling. Rayleigh widened his eyes a bit at that. He doesn't know what Dragon was like in person. He had heard rumors of him from several people on what Dragon was like. It didn't make sense for him to steal Luffy. If the rumors about him were true, maybe something had happened that caused him to kidnap Luffy. Rayleigh questioned them. Are you sure? Katakuri had stepped forward. Yeah, we were there when it happened. Before we could do anything he had disappeared when lightning struck, he said, grimacing. It was his worst failure. Luffy tilted his head at them. I was stolen by Dad. The man nodded before explaining further. When you were born, Dragon had snuck into the nursery and stole you from your crib. Bruley flinched at that. She had been there when it happened after all. Luffy was scratching his head at this. He sounds like a bad guy, but he saved Sabo from that mean celestial dragon. He was contemplating, he stole him from his other side of his family which would make him bad, but he also saved his Sabo Nai which made him good. Katakuri narrowed his eyes at that, he didn't know he had another stepbrother Sabo. Luffy nodded at him beaming yeah. Sabo. We shared a cup of sake with Ace, and Sabo became my big brother also. Luffy's smile dimmed a bit. We thought he died when he was shot by a celestial dragon years ago, but turns out is alive. So, what do you plan to do? Rayleigh stepped forward and asked them. We plan to bring him back to Totto land to reunite him with our family, Broly replied. Luffy on the other hand shook his head I can't. I have to train my Haki. Katakuri raised his eyebrow at that Haki. He looked at Rayleigh for a response. I was training Luffy-kun here to improve his observation Haki, it's his biggest disadvantage right now Rayleigh told Katakuri, who nodded in understanding at this. Broly deep in thought came up with an idea how about this all of them were listening to her and had their full attention on her now. My devil fruit ability, the mirror no mi. It can turn a mirror into a doorway of sorts, we can leave a mirror here and I can bring him back here too for training, how's that? Rayleigh nodded at the idea that could work, at the rate his learning he could probably finish in no time. After that, you can bond with him with your family. The Charlottes lit up at Rayleigh's acceptance of the idea. You have my gratitude for taking care of our brother. Katakuri said, Rayleigh just laughed and waved it off, although he had to ask about her. How's Big Mom nowadays? Rayleigh asked. Katakuri had answered him with a soft look she's getting better. At this, Rayleigh smiled is that so? Rayleigh looked at Luffy who looked like he wasn't paying attention at all what do you think Luffy? Luffy snapped out of it and nodded yeah. Sure. The Charlotte's sweat dropped again, did he even pay attention at Broly my suggestion? Katakuri gestured for Luffy to come on board their boat to meet with the rest of the family well let's go back to Totto land to meet with the rest of the family, they have really wanted to see you. Luffy nodded. After waving Rayleigh farewell, Luffy with his newfound older siblings sailed off to Totto land, in the meantime, Luffy got a good look at them and gasped when he noticed their distinct features. Hey. Your neck Luffy pointed at a man who along with her siblings recoiled and flinch, they were expecting him to insult or make a bad comment of it. But instead. It's so cool. I want a tall neck like that. Where did you get it? Luffy said with stars in his eyes. They were stunned with a man going wide-eyed and a shiny glint in her eyes. People outside of the family and Mama's island always saw her as a freak. A monster. But their baby brother who was raised elsewhere didn't, her brother liked her neck. The man, who compassed herself from her shock, smiled lightly and patted his head gratefully. Thank you, I was born with it. So cool. A man smiled wider at how her little brother was so amazed by her neck, Luffy after staring a couple of minutes in amazement, smiled and stretched his neck, the siblings were surprised at first before remembering, right, devil fruit allows him to stretch. There. Now we look alike Luffy beamed at Amanda and hugged her, she softly giggled and warmly smiled at this and patted his head which surprised Katakuri and Broly. She always kept a cold look on her face ever since she turned into a teenager. Katakuri stepped forward and asked him so aren't you a bit suspicious of us? Luffy just shook his head and smiled at him no, you guys seem like good guys. Katakuri asked another question, don't we look different to you? As if we aren't your siblings by how different we look. Katakuri pointedly looked at Broly and Amanda with their obvious different looks. Luffy tilted his head at this so. Ace Nai and Sabo Nai have different parents, but we still are siblings. So what if you look different? You guys are siblings. Be it by blood, drinking sake together by choice. At this Katakuri was surprised, someone who didn't bet an eye that they weren't siblings, that was a nice change, not only that he sounded surprisingly wise. Broly stared softly at their little brother, I think our siblings and mama would get along nicely with you at this Luffy stared at Broly surprised when he looked at her face. A branch. Katakuri huffed while a man snorted in amusement while Broly twitched at that my name is Broly. Not branch. Luffy just laughed at that before he got a good look at her face. Especially her scar. Nah, branch. It's Broly. Where did you get that scar? It looks cool. I got a scar too see. Luffy pointed towards the one under his eye while beaming at her, although she frowned. The siblings were silenced by that question, while Broly put her hand on that scar reminiscing a bit, while Katakuri had a grim look of the reminder why she had it, Luffy frowned when it seemed like a bad topic he had brought up. Broly took a deep breath and explained. When I was a child, Broly and I wandered around an island. When we went into an alleyway, a couple of older boys were there, turns out Katakuri attacked them when they made fun of his special look, they kept badmouthing him, so I stood up to them, and they attack us because they couldn't hurt him, so they went after the weaker ones, I was able to push Broly out of the way though. Katakuri had a look of guilt at this, while Amanda put her hand on Broly's shoulder for support. Luffy frowned at that's stupid. I hate cowards like that who do that. The older siblings nodded at this. Most people target the weaker and younger ones because they can't beat or reach the older and strongest ones, Amand said, remembering how Marines went after her younger sister Poir. Luffy remembered how Blue Jam had found him and his brothers when Ace was different. They tried tying him up with rope, but that didn't work. When Blue Jam's group came, he had thrown Ace and Sabo away and let himself be captured and tortured. He may have been stronger, but he couldn't react fast enough when they hit him. Katakuri grimaced and clenched his fist, seeing what his next words are before they came out. Just like when Blue Jam had that guy beat me with knives on his gloves because he couldn't get to Ace Nai and Sabo Nai. Luffy nodded in understanding. After a few seconds of silence and realization of what he had said, Brulé went pale while a man kept a flat look but clutched tightly on her sword. Their brother's childhood wasn't looking so good with his training and now the fact that he was apparently tortured. What has he been through? Brulé looked at his scar and touched it softly. Is this how you got the scar? She asks gently. Nope, they didn't give me a scar. I did this one myself. At this Brulé widened her eyes while the other raised an eyebrow at that. Why? Be what? Brulé raising her voice in surprise while Luffy explained while smiling sheepishly, I wanted to prove I was tough enough to become a pirate, so I stabbed myself. At this they were either pinching their noses or facepalming at that. Although Katakuri was surprised seeing what he said next. But yours is cooler. I got this scar because I did it. You got it because you stood up to someone who was mean to your brother. You were brave and strong. Luffy beamed at Brulé, who was surprised before having tears in her eyes. Whenever Mama had given birth to a child, when they look at her they would cry. Most of her siblings when they were children flinch when they saw her until they got used to her because of her witch-like appearance, and with the scar it added to the scariness. When Luffy was born he didn't do that. He laughed and smiled at her. The scar had been a grim reminder of that day, but when her little brother had put it like that, yeah, she got this scar because she stood up to them, older people who could beat her. She stood up to them that day. She had been brave. This scar never truly was a reminder of her pain. It had been a reminder that she stood up tall and strong up against people who made fun of his brother. Yeah, you're right, I was pretty brave back then. Brulé smiled at Luffy at this, while crying softly in joy. Amand and Katakuri were stunned before they started smiling. Even though one of them was covering it up, it seemed their sister had weights on her shoulder removed. Luffy noticed how she was crying and decided to hug her. His older brothers Ace and Sabo would always hug him when he cries, and in turn he would hug them back when they feel sad or depressed because they felt like they shouldn't have been born or they were a mistake. When he gathered his crew, he had hugged Chopper when he felt like a monster that everyone hated. He had hugged Robin when they got her back from Eni's lobby and told her he was glad that she was born. She had cried but was smiling and hugging him at that. They weren't mistakes. He was happy Ace and Sabo were born. He was happy his crew was born. Be it Marines, pirates, or strangers. He was happy everyone was born. You need a hug. Sabo Nai and Ace Nai would always hug me when I cry. Which Brulé gratefully returned, hugging him tightly while sobbing quietly into his shoulder. He noticed how Amand and Katakuri looked like they wanted to comfort her also. He stretched his arms and pulled them into a group hug. They were surprised at first, but they started hugging both Brulé and Luffy. They shot a grateful glance at Luffy for helping their sister and being able to get a chance to comfort her in this emotional moment. Such a warm accepting embrace, how nice, the older siblings thought when being hugged by Luffy. It felt nice being hugged by him. After a while, they pulled out of the hug with happy expressions on their face, while Brulé was clinging onto Luffy from behind while beaming at him, which he returned when he looked up to face her. It felt like Sabo and Ace holding on to him. Luffy looked forward and tilted his head at Katakuri. When are we going to get there? Katakuri responded, it will take a while. In the meantime, Katakuri responded before he took out a snail phone from his jacket. Why not we contact the rest of our family? At Totto land. Big Mom right now was in the throne room tapping her feet. In front of her is Katakuri's den Mushi. She's been waiting for the good news in a while, and she wasn't alone. Some of her children had come by and hang around while looking at the den Mushi also. She waited and waited and waited until it started to ring. Everyone in the room had tensed and lit up at this. Did they found him? Big Mom ordered her children to get the others. Once everyone was there, she picked it up, and all of them were even more tense. Some seemed to pray or were hoping for the good news. Big Mom with one big breath asks him the question everyone wanted to know. Did you find him? The snail phones mimicked what his facial expression was like. It changed suddenly to a curious and childlike expression. Who is this? Is this my mom? My name is Monkey D. Luffy. I am going to become the king of the pirates. Katakuri, Amand, and Brulé face-palmed at that. Even though she was his mother, he still said that to a Yonko of all people. At this they had mixed reactions at first. Some were stunned, some snorted, some had dropped their jaws, while Big Mom, hearing his voice on the snail, shed tears and smiled warmly. After years they're getting him back. After being shocked, they started celebrating. Finally. They are getting him back. Finally. They are going to see him again. Finally. They were all going to be together. Luffy on the other end of the snail was confused at the sounds of what seems to be crying and cheering. Boy. What's going on over there? Big Mom just stood down again and smiled warmly. Don't worry about it, Katakuri, how close are you now? Oh, okay. Luffy said. Well, Katakuri said halfway there. Also, Luffy won't be here most of the time in the first few weeks or months. Big Mom along with her children were confused as to why. Big Mom asked the question on everyone's mind. Why not? We had came across Rayleigh, who was training Luffy now. At this, the Charlottes were surprised. Big Mom eyes narrowed at that. For Rayleigh to take interest in her son, he must have seen something in him besides his strength. Rayleigh? Why? Smoothie asked. She was stunned at the fact that her little brother was training with Roger's first mate. Luffy was training with him to improve his observation haki. Burly made a proposal to put a mirror there so she and Luffy could travel through the mirror world to bring him back to Amazon Lily to train with him. Big Mom decided to ask about it later when they got back. Is that so? Alright, make sure to inform me when you're about an hour away from here, alright? Big Mom asked of her son. Yes, Mama. And after that, he hung up. After that, Big Mom smiled warmly at her children as she stood up and announced something. 3 words, those words were something they wanted to hear. It's been a long time coming. Is coming back. Present. Chapter. After that, she had dismissed her children and stayed while looking at the snail phone before going back to her regular business, which was just paperwork. She had also gotten word from her forces in Fishman Island. Jim, the former warlord, had proposed a meeting to talk things out, which she accepted. Now all that's left was Katakuri's return with Luffy. Everything was falling into place. She was drinking tea and waiting for the snail phone ringed. When it did, she picked it up. Katakuri had called saying they were waiting an hour away. She started moving towards the harbor. When she went outside the door, her children, who were there, making their way to check if Katakuri called, looked curious on where she was going. Mama, where are you going? Maikuru, her long-armed daughter, asked with Marble beside her also wondering. Big Mom looked at her children smiling. Katakuri called. They're 1 hour away from here. At this, her children were surprised before scrambling to gather the rest of their siblings. At that, Big Mom turned back and started walking to the harbor to greet them. When she went outside and started walking through the streets, her citizens were surprised at her presence. Some shot her sad, sympathetic looks. Rumors of her missing child had circulated around Totto land. After her child's disappearance, she had stopped being tyrannical towards her people. Although anyone who dared insult her or her children were met with their souls completely drained by an angered mother. After walking towards the harbor, she just stood waiting, looking onwards to the horizon, while the people around her were wondering why the Yonko was standing there, seemingly waiting for someone. After a few seconds, they were met with a surprise. Her children had also slowly started to come. Not only that, but it also seemed all her children were there, except for Katakuri, Amanda and Burly. Oven sat on a box with Tefuki by his side, standing arms crossed, waiting for their brother Katakuri and Luffy. Mondi was standing there with Hachi and Effler, who was tapping her feet, waiting until Amanda and their brother Luffy came into view. Prim and Praline were hanging in the sea. Opera was looking into the ocean with binoculars, and Anna was being cuddled by Poir while she held her stitched-up teddy bear. She learned to stitch up her teddy bear, which she took great interest in, rather than stabbing it violently when Burly offered to teach her to stitch so she could stab it again. Montdor had a snail in hand, waiting for a signal of a ship approach from the territorial sea slugs. Many of them were making idle chat, wondering what their little older brother was like. He had potential to be the sweet commander after Snack, and a bounty as high as Katakuri's to boot, and had the strength to show it after beating admirals. Not only that, he was pretty bold and had guts. He proclaimed to Mama that he was going to take after Roger and be the next king of the pirates after all. He was going to be an interesting one. After a while, Montdor got a report from the snail. Montdor-sama. We have got a signal of an approaching ship. At this, the siblings knew who it was. Don't worry. It's one of ours. Montdor said. Roger. They're coming, F.A. Opera announced, lowering his binoculars after looking through them. Sparrow motioned for him to lend the binoculars to him, which he did, and he looked into the sea with it, seeing the design of the boat heading for them. That was definitely one of their ships. They're going to arrive soon, Proin. He said in delight at the sight of his siblings coming into view. He noticed something coming flying into view, which he squinted his eyes at. Huh? His siblings noticed this. Cracker tilted his head towards his older brother, curious in what he saw. What's wrong, Pironai-san? Sparrow didn't respond, he just seemed focused on whatever was slowly coming towards them. Until he could make out the face, and that started to becoming visible. Luffy? He said out loud before realizing. He was flying right at them. Sparrow now was sweating before he shouted incoming. But before they could react. Bang. Something had crashed into their right side into a building. The citizens stepped back but didn't leave out of curiosity while the Charlotte were on guard. They were tensed and unsheathed their weapons from whatever crashed into the wall until. Man, that was a pretty hard crash. The voice came from the impact. At that they lowered their weapons. That voice. The figure came out of the rubble and debris coming out from he had crashed. Wearing short blue trousers with cuffs, sandals, and a sleeveless red vest, he had shaggy black hair. At that they sheathed their weapons back and relaxed, knowing who it was. It was him. Luffy just blinked up with curious and innocent eyes and tilted his head at them. Who are you guys? Are you guys my siblings? Katakuri had told Luffy that the rest of the family may be waiting at the harbor. He didn't hear his mother say anything about gathering them there. Big Mom had started walking forward slowly while her children made way, stopping when she was standing in front of him, both looking at each other, although Big Mom's face was shadowed. After a few seconds of silence, she started shaking her shoulders. Sniff. She was holding back tears. He was there, right in front of him. After all these years, he was here in front of her. Luffy tilted her head at her in deep thought. He looked behind her and noticed how the other people who was either crying softly, warmly smiling at him, or were curious. Luffy looking back at her and asked a question which broke the silence. Are you, my mama? At this Big Mom breathed in before nodding slowly towards him. Yes I am. Your mama. At this Luffy beamed before looking in confusion. He wanted to hug her, but he was smaller before thinking to himself Gear Road can turn my arm or leg bigger so. Luffy put his thumb into his finger. Gear Road. Big Mom and her children tensed at this. They saw how he had put his thumb into his hand to enlarge it and hit that giant marine in that broadcast. Was he going to hit her for not being there for him? What is he? One of them shouted. But. Wait. Katakuri said from behind, walking towards them. They finally docked and were worried when their baby brother threw himself at them. The siblings looked at their older brother now. Is not going to hit her, he said slowly. At this they raised their eyebrows at their elder brother before now focusing on their brother who was finally back. Luffy jumped and kept blowing, turning both his arms gigantic and then his legs, then his body, then finally the head. After landing back onto the ground, their jaws dropped with Big Mom widening her eyes and gaping at this. Gigant man. He turned himself into a giant. Moscato exclaimed. Him and his siblings were shocked and were gaping at this. Luffy? Big Mom said surprised. What was he going to do now as a giant? Luffy grinned and opened his arms wide open. Big Mom closed her eyes thinking her son was going to hit her. I am sorry Luffy wasn't there for you. But instead, Big Mom didn't feel that. Instead she had felt something she had never felt since she was born. She felt arms around her. She was being hugged, not like how her children hugged her fingers. No, she was actually being hugged. At this she opened her eyes and turned her head to look at Luffy with wide eyes, and he turned to look at her with a smile on his face. It was nostalgic. It was like back then, the same sunny smile which felt warm. Her eyes started to become watery at taking a good look at her son's face. Luffy said one word which she wanted to hear ever since his birth, one word that she wanted to hear from all of her children. Mama. At that Big Mom couldn't hold it in anymore. She started sobbing before full-on crying while she held tightly onto him. Her son had finally come back home and he had given her something she had wanted ever since she was a child. To be hugged. It was the reason why she wanted to get one of her own kind, so she could feel what was it like to be hugged. Everyone in the giant village was afraid of her for some reason which had hit her hard. She even became obsessed with giants because she wanted to be hugged for once. Her parents couldn't because they were small and they abandoned her. But now, she felt at peace. Her son's smile was warm, but his hugs. It felt like the son had embraced her and accepted her for what she was. My boy, me baby boy. She sobbed into his shoulder while Luffy rubbed her back soothingly. The Charlottes were stunned before they started looking softly or warmly at the sight. They had never seen their mother cry before. When Luffy was stolen from them, their mother always looked like she was going to cry at the mention of him, but she held them back. So, when finally met with the sight of their brother who returned and turned into a giant and hugged their mother which made her cry, they couldn't help but let out tears. This was the most emotional moment of their life. Amand, Katakuri and Broly were initially shocked before relaxing and looking on with happiness. After what their brother did for Broly and Amand, they could understand. Their baby brother was able to warm people's hearts and heal mental scars and easily rid of people's insecurities. After a while Luffy started to shrink down, but instead of reverting back to his normal size, he turned smaller. Back when he was child smaller. Damn. I turned back like how I did when I was still back with Ace and Sabo. Luffy pouted and grumbled at this. He had made Gear Road after seeing a balloon from a book which Sabo had shown him, after explaining what a balloon was. He tried and was able to inflate his arm, but he turned smaller every time when he didn't fully master it yet. Ace, Sabo and Makino when she visited, would cuddle him when he was like that, although Ace would laugh at him sometimes. When he had turned small, most of the female siblings cooed at this, so cute. Sparrow walked forward, grabbed him up and raised him in front of his siblings. Me brothers and sisters. Our brother and child of mama. Has come home PROIN. At this they grinned and smiled, some raising their hands in the air before voicing their celebrations, and so on about Luffy's return. At this Luffy tilted his head. Are you guys my siblings? Sparrow looked up and smiled. Yeah, we are Paroin. Oh okay. Sparrow blinked a couple of times, then sweat dropped at that. He sure is quick to accept Paroin. Big Mom along with her children with Luffy in hand, they had passed him around, many looked at him in curiosity, some beamed and gushed at him, saying how he was adorable and cute like this, walked back towards the castle. The citizens were too stunned to move at the events that unfolded. How the hell were they able to comprehend everything that had happened? At this all of them conveniently decided to forget about this as memories of this event, as it would give a killer migraine if the memory resurfaced. After returning back, she ordered her chefs to cook dinner while her children all assembled around the dining table. Sparrow sat Luffy down on a diner chair between Big Mom and himself. All siblings' attention were on their brother who has returned after years of separation from him. After a while he turned back to normal, much to some of the siblings' disappointment, some pouting wanting to cuddle him in his smaller form. Taking this moment to wait for the chefs to arrive, they decided to talk. Luffy tilted his head and crossed his arms. So you guys are my siblings? Luffy asked, to which they all nodded at. Big Mom perked at this, she should probably announce her children. Luffy, these here are Sparrow, Kompet, Katakuri. She pointed and told the name her children. When they were called, they greeted Luffy with yo, hi, hellos and other forms of introducing themselves towards their brother. After all is said and done, Luffy stood up, smiled and announced himself. Yo. I am Monkey D. Luffy. I am going to become the king of the pirates. Kompet snorted. Yeah, we heard he did introduce himself on the snail phone after all, that really surprised the hell out of her though. Luffy tilted his head. So, I have younger siblings. Flam from the other side of the table responded vocally. Yeah. You are Ani-chan. Putting next to her nodded with her road eye closed. She didn't want her big brother to see her as a freak. The rest of siblings younger than Luffy nodded towards him. More importantly, how are you doing, Luffy? Smoothie asked, leaning forward in curiosity of his well-being. I'm okay. I just discovered Sabo Nai was alive. Luffy beamed back at her with an innocent smile. Sabo Nai? Smoothie tilted her head at that. Was there someone besides Fire Fist Ace who was a stepbrother? Yeah, Sabo Nai. Me and Ace and Sabo shared a cup of sake together which made us brothers. Luffy stated, which surprised them at this new information. Luffy continued on, but less happy. We were gonna set sail when we reached, but Sabo sailed earlier. He was shot by a celestial dragon. Luffy scowled at mentioning the celestial dragon. The siblings were surprised before looking worried. Was he okay? Raisin asked, worried on how Luffy had to experience his stepbrother being shot at. He was saved, but he had amnesia, but he recovered his memories. He met up with Ace, and then they both met up with me. Luffy nodded at Raisin, who looked relief along with some of his other siblings. What is he like? Galad asked, leaning forward towards her brother with Puar also interested in this. She had also closed her mouth so he wouldn't see her hideous teeth. Sabo was like Ace. He hated his parents. Although Ace hated Roger, not his mom, and also he was kinder than Ace. He always hugged me when I cried like Ace did. Luffy said, beaming. Where is he now? Puar asked. Luffy gasped when she saw her open her mouth and saw her teeth. Whoa. Your teeth. At this, Puar paled at the realization of accidentally displaying her teeth. Her siblings, most prominent being Galad and Bhaskar and Katakuri, flinched at this and prepared for an insult. He wasn't raised with them after all. Amand and Brulé just started to smile towards Puar. Luffy leaped at her from his dining chair and landing next to her and came to her face to face. She started sweating and waiting for what comment he was going to make about them. It's so cool. He said with stars in his eyes. His siblings were stunned and surprised at that. Puar widened her eyes before getting watery. She would always be mocked because of her teeth. Galad, her twin and any other sibling who had accompanied her, had gotten into several fights because of that, not to mention how those mean Marines had taken her to an alleyway and mocked her. She had been insecure about it since childhood. Luffy, on the other hand, her little brother who was raised outside the family, was complimenting her. Where did you get them? Luffy asked her in awe. IIW was born with Thema. You don't think they are hideous? She asked snakingly and with hope in her eyes. Luffy tilted his head in confusion. Why would they be hideous? They look so cool. Why would I? They look amazing. I want them. Luffy said, going back to staring at her in amazement. Puar widened her eyes at that and had tears in her eyes. Her little brother didn't think they were hideous. He even wanted them. Oh really? She asked him, and he just nodded his head rapidly with stars in his eyes still. She beamed at him for that. Her brother liked her teeth. So cool. Luffy muttered, Poor after wiping her tears was now getting flustered. She was used to her siblings saying her teeth were fine, and that was nothing wrong. Luffy on the other hand, complimented and praised her teeth and was still staring in amazement of her. It was really embarrassing. Ballad, who was sitting next to her, beamed at Luffy for complimenting Poor's teeth. She stood up and went to him and ruffled his head for that. She was grateful for what he did, and much to her twin's embarrassment. She joined in. Right. Her teeth just make her so adorable, Gallet said with pride in her voice with a big grin, while her siblings looked amused and smirked at what she was doing. Gee Gallet. Poor spluttered out while blushing harder at the fact her twin was also complimenting them. Yeah. I wish I had them also. Luffy said with a grin of his own. Both Gallet and Luffy were now praising her teeth in several ways. The rest of the family were happy at the fact their little brother didn't mind her looks, even envying her of her teeth. They looked at Poor amused at how red she looked. Some even adding their own positive comments on her teeth much to her irritation. She really does look amazing with them. Hechi, Nissan. Hey UKUKU she has always been cute. PROIN. Heroes nice ama. Of course she is cute. All my little sisters are. Berlini. Berlini sama. Now at that the younger Charlotte sisters were flustered by Burley's claim. Poor One-chan always looked pretty cool with them teeth. Waikuru-chan. Poor had covered her face with her hands at this point, her face somehow getting more redder and redder at the onslaught of compliments ranging from cool, cute, amazing and adorable. I want to bury myself in a hole. She internally whined. Big Mom was amused by how her children who joined in on Gallet and Luffy praising Poor. She smiled at Luffy, he didn't mind his siblings' looks. After a while she decided to help Poor who looked like she would faint from sheer embarrassment. Alright that's enough, spare your sister who may pass out soon, Big Mom said which had quieted them down. Slam. Thank you. Mama. Poor had slammed her head onto the table while turning her head towards her mom, her head was steaming from all those compliments. Although she was internally happy and beaming about their little brother, he thought her teeth were cool. Although you really do look cute with those teeth my adorable child. Big Mom finished with a shit-eating grin, sure she may be nicer to her kids, but she still was sadistic in a way. Mama. Poor whined while shooting a look betrayal at their mom, her siblings giggling or snickering at that. Luffy was now sitting on Gallet's lap when she took a seat, she raised an eyebrow at this, but smiled while wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head on his hair with a lazy grin. Gallet stayed like that until she remembered Poor's prior question, lifting her head, she asked him. Luffy? Luffy leaned into her and looked up at her with innocent eyes and chirped in response. Seeing this as a sign of her getting his attention, she asked you didn't answer Poor's question, where is he now? He's back at Dad's base, he's a revolutionary at this they scowled at the mention of dragon. Do you know about your dad? Gallet asked, and to her and the family's surprise, his response was different than what they imagined. I only knew about my dad when Gigi mentioned him back at Water 7, never met him before. Luffy said, they frowned and some scowled at this. He didn't bother raising you? Big Mom asked leaning forward and looking down at her son with sadness in her eyes. That bastard didn't even bother to raise him when he took him from her. Nope. I was raised with Sabo and Ace by mountain bandits when Gigi dropped me off there. They grimaced and frowned at that, some even scowling. They started to hate the man more for what he did, including Garp, said man's father. The hell was the point of stealing Luffy from them when he didn't bother to raise him? Why the hell did a marine of all people left him with bandits? After a few seconds of silence. Gallet compassed herself and changed back to a look of curiosity, what position is he? Your brother, Sabo. Luffy shrugged he said something about being the chief of staff. Now at this they went wide-eyed, his stepbrother, Ace, was the ND division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, and now, as it turns out, he had another stepbrother by the name of Sabo, who was the chief of staff of the revolutionary. What kind of brothers did he sworn to? After a couple seconds of silence again. Luffy, can I ask you something? Someone said from their seat. Sure. Luffy replied, raising his head towards the one who said that. I am Bhaskard, I am your older brother about what you said about Poor's teeth. Poor perked up at this and looked at his older brother, knowing why he was interested. What about them? They're really cool. Luffy said with Gallet nodding rapidly in agreement, Poor blushed again at that. What about my teeth? Bhaskard said reaching up to unwrap the cloth which covered his mouth to show his own fangs. Are they cool? Bhaskard asked with little hope in his eyes as he revealed his teeth towards him. Mustard and Dosmerch, his triplet brothers, looked at him in surprise before looking at Luffy, wondering what he has to say. Whoa. Your teeth at that. Gallet let go of him as he launches straight at Bhaskard and almost tackled him. It's amazing. It's like a dragon. Roar. Luffy exclaimed said while mimicking a dragon trying to be terrifying, although he was looking more adorable than terrifying, were some of the opinions going through the other siblings' head looking at him. Bhaskara widened his eyes at this like a dragon. Don't my teeth resemble a sea monster? He asked. He had been called a sea monster when he was a child and also throughout his life by people who have seen his teeth, which was for the mouth cover. Shishishi. Dragons are cooler and way more stronger than them. Luffy exclaimed while beaming at him. Bhaskara was flustered but was also happy about the comment. Luffy just smiled and laughed and sit on the man's lap now, which caused the man to look panicked. He never had a sibling that did this. He looked left and right pleadingly for his siblings to do something to help, but they looked amused. Hey Una Luffy, why not you try and eat this? Perospero decided to stand up and help his younger brother. Food. Luffy said, leaping off the man's lap and running towards Perospero who was also walking towards him. Perospero walked towards him and did a magic trick like he did with other children and his siblings when they were younger and made candy appear out of thin air. At this Luffy tilted his head as he looked at the candy in his hand. What is this? Food. At that, the Charlottes looked at their brother in surprise before quickly narrowing their eyes at that. He didn't know what candy was. Perospero narrowed his eyes at how his brother didn't seem to know what candy was. This is candy, he said slowly. At this Luffy lit up. Those things other kids get on Children's Day. What does it taste like? The family frowned at that, the way he phrased it. Did he get any candy for his birthday? It's strawberry flavored candy. Paroin, he said while clutching his candy cane tightly. It sounded like he never ate anything related to sweets, unless. Luffy, have you ever ate candy or sweets before? Luffy shook his head and responded nope. At this the siblings and their mother looked horrified. For a child to never have tasted candy, the mere thought was beyond horrible, especially in Totto land. At this Perospero made more candy in his free hand, while also internally scowling at this fact while forcefully holding a smile. He was going to make sure he tasted several different kinds of sweets. He may even pay a visit to the island he was raised at, so he could question some of the locals on why he didn't receive any. Perospero. Make sure Luffy tries several sweets, Big Mom ordered while looking at Luffy with sorrow. She made sure her children and citizens, especially the children, try candy. For her son to have never tasted something like candy. Of course. Mama. He replied without hesitation. Here. Try some. Luffy. Perospero gestured for Luffy to try some. Luffy grabbed the pile of candies in his hand and shoved them into his mouth. After chewing a bit then gulping it, he had stars in his eyes. Sugoi. It tastes so sweet. Perospero put on a more genuine smile. Candy has many flavors, some are sweet, some are sour. It is normally made with sugar. Peroin. After a couple of seconds, the doors burst open. The chefs have finally finished preparing the food. The numerous chefs and servants laid out various types of sweets, desserts, cakes and various pastry dishes on the table. Oven noticed how he looked at the food in awe and amazement, as if he has never seen them before. Now Luffy, have you ever seen any of these kinds of food before? Oven asked, which caused the siblings to look at Luffy in wonder. Luffy just looked at his older brother and shrugged half of it. Oven perked up at this. He was going to show him a bunch of other baked goods later. He was the Ministry of Baking for a reason. After a couple of seconds Luffy immediately devoured his plate of food before stretching his arms to grab more. This definitely our brother. Smoothie snorted, which the family agreed with. He was going through several plates of food. It may even rivals Mama's appetite. Nana. Someone was tugging onto his pants. Luffy looked down while gulping the food in his mouth and saw Nana tugging his pants while holding onto a stitched-up teddy bear onto her chest. Luffy tilted her head at her. What? How did you stretch? She asked curiously. Luffy grinned and pulled his chin, which stretched inhumanly. I ate the gum fruit. I am a rubber person. At that Nana seemed awed. She tried climbing up onto his brother's lap but couldn't reach. Luffy seeing this picked her up and placed her on his lap with the teddy bear while tilting his head, wondering what she wanted to do. Nana looks at his face before using her tiny hands to pull her brother's skin, looking amazed at how it stretches. She pulled his chin, his cheek, his nose then his arms, while Luffy just shrugged lightly and smiled at her. The Charlotte smiled at this, and Nana was normally shy around her siblings, even those around her age, but seemed to be getting along well with their brother who returned. It was a pretty heartwarming scene. How did you get your devil fruit power? She asked in wonder. Luffy at this rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. I kind of ate it on accident. How do you eat a devil fruit by accident? Toffuki asked, raising his eyebrows at that. Shanks had the fruit. When mountain bandits came, he made a fool of himself and I got angry at that. I eat when angry, he said. Well, this just proves it more, Smoothie said to herself, amused. When she was younger, she would bang her head on the door frames when entering a store because of her height. Sometimes when she didn't pay attention, she would grumble and craved for a glass of juice or desserts to help her relax. Whenever she did, she was pretty sure her other siblings also had food cravings when upset or angry. After finishing their food, Anana was just sitting on Luffy's lap while stretching his finger in astonishment. Big Mom looked at her son and asked a question. "So, what's your crew like, my son?" At this the family were leaning in curiosity, wondering what kind of people joined his crew. "Okay, who should I start with?" Luffy asked, blinking at everyone curiously. The older siblings smiled at that. From what they have seen from him, he sure was childish. It was kind of nice. Not only that, but he also seemed to not mind some of their brothers and sisters' unique features. "Start with the first then the last," Broyes said. "It would make sense to go with the first then the last crew member. Also tell us how you met them and how you got them to join you," Burly added on. "Tamago. Get the bounties of my son's crew." Big Mom ordered, to which he nodded and left to get it. He had already printed it out, but she ordered for him to wait until they got him back. She wanted to put faces on the names his son was gonna mention. In the meantime, Luffy started talking about his nakama. "Alright. First would be Zoro. He is my first mate and a swordsman. He uses 3 swords to fight. I met him in East Blue. He got into trouble with Marines when he saved a girl from them. He made a deal in which he would go without food for a month to spare her and her mom. Turned out they weren't keeping their promise and were going to kill him in a week, so I told him about it and forced him to join my crew if he wanted to live and get his swords back," Luffy said cheerfully. The swordsman and swordswoman of the family, mainly Amand, were interested about the fact that he was a swordsman. Some sweat dropped at the fact he pretty much blackmailed his first mate to join. Big Mom perked up and looked serious about the starving part but didn't make a comment about it. "What do you mean saved a girl from them?" Mondi asked curiously about that part. Luffy frowned. "Some kid had a dog that was going to attack the girl when Zoro stepped in and saved her. His dad was considered a high-ranking marine there. He was pretty mean. He threatened to kill his own man if they didn't shoot us." Now at the family nodded in understanding while frowning. Sounded like the brat he was mentioning was spoiled. "Is your swordsman strong?" Amanda asked with the interest of fighting in her eyes. She had fought with many swordsmen, but they all weren't much of a challenge. She wanted to clash swords with a person who would be worthy for her blade, Shirao, especially the strongest swordsman, Mihik. If her little brother's swordsman was strong, she could finally ease her boredom, and heck, maybe she could have found someone she could have romantic feelings for. She only would date a person if they could beat her or tie her in a duel. Luffy nodded and smiled happily. "Yeah. And his training to get stronger too. When you meet him you guys could spar." Now at that she smirked slightly. She was eager to meet this man when he comes to Totto land. After Zoro we met Nami, but she didn't join yet, so next would be Usopp, the liar and the sniper. Now at that they raised their eyebrow at the liar part but let their brother continue on. "We met him when we were looking for a bigger ship and his childhood friend was the next owner of a boat company. Some jerk named Kuro threatened her, so I kicked his butt and she gave us our first ship, the Going Merry." Next would be Sanji, the cook. He fights with his legs. "I met him when we had to work at the place he was working at because I accidentally hit the place with a cannonball from a marine who shot at us. I kept trying to get Sanji to join my crew but he kept refusing, but he joined us when I beat Krieg who attacked the place." At that some of them let out a hum without really any comments. After Sanji, Nami joined us. She's the navigator and she had to work for some jerk called Arlong who was really mean. I beat him up while my crew beat up his crew and she joined us when I beat him. She really likes money, but she's really nice to kids." "Arlong? As in Fishman Arlong?" Prim asked, raising an eyebrow at that. Well, the siblings seemed a bit surprised. Some had heard about it, a former sun pirate in East Blue, while the ones who didn't know were questioning what was a fishman doing in East Blue. "Yeah, that guy. I beat him when he was forcing Nami to draw maps along with the place." To which they nodded at, not that surprising, he had beaten him, he's a Charlotte after all. After this, Tamago had came back with posters in hand. Big Mom instructed him to project the bounties onto the screen to display them. After showing the faces of the crew members he had mentioned, Luffy continued onwards with Chopper. We then headed to the Grand Line and met Chopper. Nami got really sick so we went to find a doctor, so we climbed up a mountain and met a doctor so she could help her. Chopper is a reindeer that ate the devil fruit, the Hito Hito no Mi. He's also a doctor that worked for the doctor who helped Nami. When Tamago projected Chopper's bounty, some cooed at how cute he was while some raised eyebrows at his bounty. Anana smiled upon seeing Chopper cute. She muttered. She wanted to cuddle him and stab him, then stitch him up. "That's interesting," Big Mom said. She wanted to see it up close and personal. What an interesting creature in her son's crew. As much as she wanted to add it to her collection, it was her son's crewmate, so that's a no. "Is he strong?" Why is his bounty so low? Cracker asked in curiosity, did the doctor of his little brother's crew have any combat capabilities? He is strong. He has these balls he eats that can change his forms. He can change into a regular reindeer or a giant fur ball. Really? Anana, Melise and Panda asked in awe at the fact that he could change forms. Luffy nodded, which got them excited. They wanted to meet him and see it up and personal. But I have no idea why his bounty is so low, Luffy said, shrugging. He never understood why his bounty was so low. Chopper was strong. After Chopper is Robin. She worked for Crocodile until he backstabbed her. I beat him up and she joined my crew. She's the arch all ogas. I think that's the word. She's the arch all ogas. At that they sweat dropped. Seems like their brother had trouble with difficult words. You mean archaeologist? Prim asked with amusement. Yeah, that. She likes old things which are ancient. She can also grow hands, legs and eyes anywhere. She was held by the world government when they threatened they would hurt us, so she gave herself to them. We stormed the place and got her back. You mean Eni's lobby? Snack said. He remembered Tamago mentioning about how he stormed Eni's lobby. Yeah. We kicked their butts. Nobody messes with my nakama. Luffy said seriously with a look that promised to fight if anyone tried. Then there's Frankie, he is the shipwright. We met him when we were going to save Robin, and he with his family built us a new ship when Going Merry sunk. He built us the Thousand Sunny and joined our crew when we got Robin back, and she forced him. How was he forced to join? Noi said, asked in curiously, what did the demon child do? Robin had made two hands and squeezed his balls, Luffy said, shrugging. He was a rubber man, so he wouldn't feel anything unless they were coated with Haki. At this, Noi said with his brothers paled and shuddered in horror. Even the Loja, who wouldn't feel it unless she used Haki, also winced. I can see how she got her epithet, Montour said, shuddering, with his brothers nodding in agreement. Their sisters on the other hand just looked on in amusement. Their brother's archaeologist sounded interesting. Luffy now had stars in his eyes as he explains more about Frankie. Not only is he a shipwright, but he is also a cyborg. The cyborg. Maikuru, Marble, Maple, Custard, Effler, Bruley and the really young siblings shouted in unison. It had caused some of the siblings to jump or nearly have a heart attack. It was pretty quiet with a few questions, until the mention of the fact one of his crewmates was a cyborg. They did not see that coming, well, except for Katakuri, who looked a bit amused at his younger siblings' antiques. Luffy nodded. Yeah. He can launch his fist like a rocket at people to either hit them or grab them with his right arm, and can fire either a cannonball or bullets with it. He can even breath fire out of his mouth. Really? More voices joined in with stars in their eyes, amazed by the description of his crewmate, while the others looked on in amusement. When their brother nodded, the stars in their eyes started glowing brighter. After a couple of minutes to calm down, Luffy continued. Anyways, moving on, next up is Brook. He was stuck in the Floridian Triangle with that gecko guy. At this, a certain twin stood up. You mean Gecko Moria, right? Also, thank you for helping Lola, Chiffon said, bowing a bit towards her little brother in gratitude for that. You look like Lola. Luffy tilted his head towards her, noticing the similarities. The family face palmed at that. Can't he connect the dots? I am her twin, Chiffon. Chiffon shouted out. Luffy blinked before looking surprised. You're her twin. Who else would she be? Chiffon with some of her siblings shouted at their baby brother, who looked like he was processing this before it all clicked. Ah. Katakuri huffed in amusement. Yeah, that makes sense. Slam. Chiffon with some of her siblings slammed their heads, while the others were either face-palming or pinching their nose or giggling and snorting in amusement of their siblings' reaction and Luffy's response. After a while, Luffy continued on about his skeleton crewmate. Brook is an awesome skeleton who likes playing music and is a swordsman like Zoro. Although Zoro wants to beat Mihawk while Brook wants to play music and meet up with Laboon. The skeleton. Laboon. Gallet raised an eyebrow at that. Luffy nodded. Yeah. He ate a devil fruit that turned him into that. He hasn't seen Laboon because he was stuck. Laboon's a whale he made friends with when he was still human. You sure have an interesting line up there, bro, Cracker said, amused about how bizarre his crew was. The cyborg shipwright, a music-playing skeleton that wants to see a whale, a reindeer who ate a devil fruit who's a doctor, a cook, a swordsman and an archaeologist, and a lying sniper. Hakompet muttered to herself. Her brother had an interesting line-up for a crew. Al thought it felt like he left several details out when he explained about how he met up with his nakamas. Now that I think about it, where is your crew, Luffy? Poor asked which of the siblings, looking at their brother in curiosity also. Now that they think about it, Luffy was there in Marineford, but his crew wasn't. Where were they? Luffy turned to a look of seriousness. They are training right now for the new world. For how long? Poor asked in wonder. Years? They widened their eyes at this. That's quite a long time. Pudding started to remember about the tattoo his brother had in the newspaper before widening her eyes and quickly closed her road one after. She stood up and asked. Was Die a way to tell your crew to train for years? Luffy looked at her and nodded. Yeah. We were going to meet in days. But we will meet in years. Do you know where they are? Why weren't they with you at Marineford? Cinnamon asked. Were they separated due to certain circumstances? He along with his crew stormed Eni's lobby to save one of their own, that proof that his crew were loyal to the point they would storm a place which would make them enemies of the governments to save a Nakama. It would make sense for them to follow their captain so they could save said captain's older brother, so why didn't they? We were at Sabati where I met Rayleigh and punched that stupid celestial dragon, Marines came, and they had a pacifista. Luffy wandered off trying to remember the name. Pacifista. Snack said helpfully, they had seen them in the broadcast, they boasted some serious firepower. Yeah that. One of them attacked my Nakama so I beat it up. When I dealt with it, Kuma came and before I could react, I was already sent flying, Luffy said while clutching his fist. He was grateful for Rayleigh teaching him observation, so he wouldn't allow something like this to happen again. Won't you start to miss them? Compet asked, worried he would feel lonely without his Nakama. Luffy shook his head. As long as they're fine I don't mind, and besides, I can use the time to know you guys. Luffy beamed at them while the siblings smiled at that. And then we will sail again. Big Mom frowned a bit at that. You aren't joining my crew. Luffy tilted her head towards her. Why would I do that? I can't be king of the pirates if I joined another crew. The siblings tense a bit and looked at their mother who looked to be deep in thought. How about an alliance then? You should call us once in a while though, Big Mom suggested, which surprised them all. They thought she would argue about it, but she had accepted it rather quickly and made up a compromise. Hell, she didn't even seem to care about how her son wanting to be king of the pirates. Are you sure, Mama? Perospero asked their mother who nodded. As long as he calls and tells us about what happens it should be fine, and also. Big Mom started smirking. Luffy, change your name from Monkey D. Luffy to Charlotte D. Luffy. Big Mom finished off with a grin. It would be a good way to get back at Dragon for what he did, and she wanted everyone to know that he was her son who she was proud of. She was going to get Morgans to publish it on the next tea party, where she would properly announce her son who came back and the name change. The siblings though lit up at the idea and looked at their brother in curiosity. He would be the first brother who would have a D along with a family name, although it was up to him. Luffy though just blinked and smiled up at Mama after a couple of seconds. Okay. Luffy said. Are you sure you're fine with this though? Proi, and Perospero raised an eyebrow at how quick he was to accept to change his family name. He wasn't complaining though, in fact he was delighted. Ace went with Portgas instead of Gold because he hated, never met and didn't know his old man, well his mother had died so he could live. I know about Dad, but only saw him once and never talked to the guy. He may be nice, but he took me away from you guys and he didn't bother talking with me. At least I met and talked with Mama and you guys, so it would be better to go with Charlotte. Right. Luffy said, tilting his head towards them, which had them thinking, yeah, he had a point, at least their mother and them actually spent time with Luffy, even though it was kind of the ST time they met, but it was due to his kidnapping. Dragon didn't bother raising or interacting with his own child, they may have met once, but that was it. Big Mom smirked at this. Welp, it's official then. The next tea party we shall announce your return as Charlotte D. Luffy. At this the siblings smiled warmly at their brother and cheered at that. Tamago show Luffy to his room. We are going to talk more with Luffy tomorrow at breakfast. It's starting to turn into night, all of you are dismissed. Yes, Mama. After that everyone left. Except Katakuri who was in deep thought with a hand clinging onto his scarf. I wonder what he would say about my teeth. After stalling for a bit, he left. After the dismissal, Luffy followed Tamago towards his room he would be staying in. After reaching the room Tamago turned around. So, this is the place where you why? Only to find Luffy gone. LLB staying. Bone? Somewhere in the castle. And what do you think about our brother Flamp? Pudding asked, laying on bed swinging her legs. She and Flamp were close after she came and helped her when bullies had grabbed her by the hair and were going to cut it. It was the first time she had ever seen her so pissed at someone and punched someone so hard. After that she had comforted her and told Mama and their older siblings about it when they came back. They were pretty livid till the point Katakuri and Mama were leaking their conqueror's haki by accident. The next day many people awoke to the sight of how most portions of the walls and the floors of the street had been recolored into one single color. Red. After that accident Pudding normally went outside with Flamp sticking close with another older sibling that watches out for them. Although she would still hear whispers of insults that are hurled at her, which was met with a quick stab towards the guy who said that. Flamp wore a red button-up blouse with long sleeves with red dotted white pants with suspender belts and has fingerless gloves with a blow dart gun she carries around. When she saw how people treated her older sister, she wanted to hit them so badly that she unlocked armament Haki this way. He seems kind of dense, naive and all around airheaded, but is pretty nice. I think he wouldn't mind seeing your road eye. Flamp said, smiling brightly at Pudding. Mama had taught her to be kind towards her siblings, as people would make fun of them for their looks. She was raised pretty strictly, which she was secretly grateful for when she saw how people had viewed her siblings. She was considered the best younger sister for always supporting and being there for her older siblings. She had been wary and tense of their older brother who was stolen from birth, thinking since he wasn't raised inside the family that he would see them differently. Fortunately he didn't, in fact he seemed to like their siblings' features, while some of them. Really? Pudding asked, Flamp, eyes open with a bit of hope. Yeah. You can definitely show him your road eye. Flamp said. Pudding though looked doubtful. You think so? He only just met us, and he wasn't raised by mama. What if he considers me a monster when he creak sees my third eye? She trailed off when she saw someone open the door slightly. She paled at the fact a person has seen her road eye when she noticed an eye poking through the small opening. Flamp tensed and internally cursed, shit. I forgot to lock the door. Opening the door full way, they were less tense seeing who it was. Luffy? Yo. Luffy greeted. Shouldn't you be with Tamago? Flamp asked in surprise. Luffy rubbed his head while looking sheepish. I kind of got distracted. Flamp was about to facepalm before she remembered, Pudding. She now looked at her older sister in worry. Did he see it? Did you see it? Me, Pudding muttered with hair shadowing her face. Dear road eye, she was now shaking a bit in fear of what he was about to comment. She had flashbacks of how people saw her and treated her like a demon. It's so cool. Luffy said in awe. Pudding widened all of her eyes and gaped at that. Assuredly. Eh? Her eyes starting to get watery, remembering all the times people would insult her, call her a monster, call her a defect, how her siblings were always there for her, and how mama had reassured that it looked fine on her. Oh really? She asked with tears in her eyes while looking at Luffy, who beamed at her. Yeah. You don't think I am a monster? She started reminiscing. You're a freak. Stay away from me, you monster. Run away. It's that thing again. Freak. 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 Luffy, hearing this, stretched his arms and pulled her into a comforting hug. It felt like meeting Chopper again. You aren't a monster. You are my sister. They are just jealous of your road eye. Pudding was softly crying, while Flamp kept quiet in this emotional moment. You don't think I should have never existed? She asked while clinging onto him and looking at him in the face with hope and tears in her eyes. Luffy was surprised at that it had sounded like. You want me to live? Ace. Luffy snapped out of it and smiled at her. Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't he? Her road eye looked cool. At this, Pudding couldn't hold it in anymore. She wailed into her brother's shoulder, clinging tightly. Oh really? She asked while crying heavily. Yeah. Screw those bastards who said mean things. They are just jealous of you. Your road eye is cool. I wish I had one. It looks amazing on you. She cried more and she started clinging harder onto him like it was her life support. I am happy you were born. At this, Pudding couldn't control herself and cried fountains while clinging hard onto her brother, which in response he rubbed her back soothingly. Her brother was happy for how she looks. He even wanted a road eye, which caused a wave of insults. He saw her as someone who was a human. He was happy for her birth. Flamp looked on while smiling warmly with tears in her eyes. She wanted to also hug and comfort her, but she hesitated. Luffy, seeing this, grinned and let go of his arms on Pudding to pull Flamp in for a group hug. She was surprised at this and looked at Luffy, who beamed at her, to which she smiled back. Looking towards Pudding, she hugged her sides and rubbed her back soothingly, and in response, Pudding clung to her also. After a while of crying, Pudding looked up towards their brother and smiled. Sniff, thank you. Ani-chan. She said softly with tears in all of her eyes, which she showed to Luffy. Luffy just grinned and pat her head like how Ace does. No problem. Although it feels weird. Pudding and Flamp tilted their head at him. What's weird? Flamp asked. I only had Ace Nai and Sabo Nai until I met you guys. It's kind of strange having sisters and younger siblings, he shrugged off. That's so. Pudding trailed off with a finger on her chin, thinking about it. Right. I should probably go back to my room, Luffy said while hitting his palm with a fist, turning around to leave. He was about to leave until he felt something tugging his shirt. Wait. Pudding exclaimed. Luffy turned his head towards her and hummed, wondering what she wanted. What's wrong? Pudding looked embarrassed while fidgeting and twiddling her fingers. Can you sleep with us? Why do you want me to sleep with you guys? Pudding frowned a bit. I have nightmares when I sleep alone. She shuddered at the nightmares she had before Flamp found out about it and slept with her to keep him away, although sometimes it didn't work. Luffy nodded in understanding. I also have nightmares when sleeping alone. At this, Pudding perked up. Really? Luffy just nodded. Yeah. Pudding smiled a bit at the fact she had someone who could relate when it comes to nightmares. She was glad that their brother returned and helped her problems and deepest insecurities. She felt weights coming off her shoulders. She felt free, it's as if the sun had came and got rid of her inner demons and dark thoughts. Flamp just shrugged at the fact their brother who returned was going to sleep with them, maybe it could help with Pudding's nightmares, guess we're having a sleepover. After turning off the lights and properly locking the door, this which Flamp double-checked, they bounced until the bed, and they slept peacefully with smiles on their faces while cuddling each other. Pudding cuddling in Luffy's chest while Flamp hugged her back from behind, it felt nice. Those three would sleep with smiles on their faces, with none of them having a single nightmare. Little did they know outside of the room. Looks like they are asleep, Cracker said with a soft look on his face. Tamago had told them about how Luffy went missing, and she immediately called for a search party, she did not want to lose her son again. When Cracker along with his group of siblings went around searching inside the castle, they heard Luffy's voice coming from within Pudding's room, which they all relaxed at, reporting his location. They gathered quietly outside Pudding's room, and they leaned in on what was going on, and were surprised. He truly is a blessing when he came back home, isn't he? Proin Perispero said softly, he was grateful for what his baby brother did today for some of his siblings' insecurities. Smoothie nodded in agreement. Yeah. If only Dragon didn't. She now exclaimed while clutching her fist tightly. The rest of the family also looking as furious as she was. Mama had given birth to a child that would have been the kindest and most supportive brother among them, but Dragon swooped in and stole him away from them. Plus. Although they relaxed in a couple of seconds, at least he has came back into his rightful place and ditched the bastard's family name and is a Charlotte instead of a monkey. After that they went to go to their bedrooms or went back to night patrol duty while Big Mom stalled a little longer. Happy she was born, she muttered softly and left wondering. Was her son happy she was born? Were any of her own children happy she was born? Chapter. The next day, Flamp was shouting into Luffy's ear to get the up from his bed. Bed up Luffy Nai-san. He snored and mumbled while sleeping. 5 more minutes. It's morning. We got to go for breakfast, Pudding already left. At this, Luffy jumped out of bed with a grin looking wide awake, which surprised her. Food. Luffy ran off while Flamp lagged behind before following, seems her brother was really hungry. At the dining room, the siblings exchanged good mornings and greetings, some looked ready for the day ahead, while the others looked like they wanted to sleep more. Food. Luffy busted the doors open and shouted, which woke up the ones who felt sleepy while looking at their brother in shock and slight annoyance. Luffy walked up to Pudding, who greeted him while beaming with eyes open. Luffy grinned and greeted her back before sitting next to her, with Flamp sitting next to him after catching up. The siblings, who witnessed how Pudding wasn't hiding her third eye, smiled remembering last night. They were glad their brother comforted and helped Pudding. Luffy looked at his mother while grinning in anticipation. Will there be meat? The siblings raised an eyebrow or were a bit surprised at that. It was pretty unusual for a sibling to ask for something besides sweets, desserts and pastry food. Totto land doesn't have meat, but we could contact our traders and ask them about, Big Mom said, shrugging. Her children were wondering how the servants were going to react when she ordered something besides the regular ingredients. They probably would have a look of surprise and disbelief. Luffy, although saddened at the fact he won't be having his favorite food, quickly cheered up. Food was food after all, maybe he could find something to eat which tasted new. Okay. In the meantime, why not tell us about the things you have seen in your adventures? Big Mom suggested towards her son while waiting for the chefs. She wondered what kind of things her son had encountered. The topic of his past would be brought up way later, for now she just wanted to know about what her son's been through when he sailed. Okay. What should I start with? Luffy's arms were crossed while thinking carefully. The siblings just waited patiently in curiosity. They only really left the land because of orders, missions and ingredients gathering, when they seemed to be running low or in need for a tea party or just straight up visit a random island that was near here on their off days. Their brother, on the other hand, probably had been through several places which piqued their interests, with the most prominent being Montdor. He always wanted to leave and explore around the world to see several different kinds of animals and places of interest, but his duties and position in the crew gave him very little time, so he collected the animals near Totto land instead. After a few seconds, Luffy raised his head and grinned, finally deciding on a certain island. It had some weird but cool animals. He really wished Gaiman came with them though. Alright. Let's start with Syrup Island. There were a bunch of strange animals over there, and it's where I met Usopp and met Gaiman. At this, Big Mom and Montdor were interested at the animals over there. Gaiman? Snack asked, tilting his head. Yeah. Gaiman. He was a pirate who was trying to find buried treasure over there, but when he climbed onto a cliff, he fell and got stuck in a chest and couldn't get out of it. He tried to get help from his crew, but they abandoned him. Luffy said while frowning at the fact he was abandoned by his crew. Is now the island's guardian and is friends with the weird animals. Luffy finished off cheerfully. What are the animals like? Montdor asked curiously with Big Mom leaning forward a bit. They wanted to know more about the animals there. Oh, they're weird. There was an elephant with tiger stripes standing on legs. A white snake with rabbit ears. There's also this creature that has giraffe spots and horns. Luffy happily described what he had seen on his crewmate's home island. Montdor and Big Mom lit up more when they heard about the living inhabitants on the island. It sounded fascinating. They weren't the only ones. Most of the siblings raised their eyebrows or were leaning forward in interest and amazement at how he described them. They wanted to see them. Really? Chiffon asked wide-eyed. She never heard or seen anything like that before throughout her life. Luffy just nodded towards her. Yeah. They were really cool. Luffy said cheerfully. Big Mom looked at Chiffon when she spoke before she widened her eyes and realized something. Oh yeah. Right. I should be informing her. She said while striking her fist in a palm as she remembered. The siblings though eyed their mother in curiosity. What's wrong? Luffy asked, tilting his head up at his mother, who looked at Luffy and responded. I should inform Lola, we found you. To which all the siblings, especially Chiffon, now just realized they forgot to inform her about the fact they found their brother. Well, maybe she did know. Luffy's father was announced in the broadcast during Marineford after all, either through that or the newspaper that came out after the utter failure of the public execution. Luffy though tilted his head at his mama, confused. But Lola already found me back at Thriller Bark. At this most of them either face palmed or snorted in amusement. She doesn't know that you were her missing brother though. Oh okay. Should we contact her now? Panda asked, eyeing her siblings. We should call her around afternoon, she tends to wake up late, Chiffon said, to which they all agreed to. She was her twin after all, so she would know her best. When the doors busted open with the chefs carrying plates of food, they proceeded to eat, with Luffy reaching out towards other people's plate and stealing food, much to some of their amusement, while the rest weren't so much as amused. When they finished eating, Big Mom was pondering about something until she shared her thoughts towards her children. I don't think we should announce the return of Luffy just yet. This caused all of them to be surprised while Parasparrow stood up and looked at his mother questioningly. Why is that, Mama? He asked. Right now, I don't think it's the right time. Luffy, you and your crew are going to sail out after years, right? Big Mom asked, turning her head towards her son, who nodded. Yeah. When you sail out and explore, make sure to come back to Totto land, that's when we will announce your return. At this the Charlottes looked at each other, silently communicating before they all looked approvingly at this. It may be long, but they liked the idea of his reveal to be later. If information came out a week later that the son of Dragon turned out to be the son of Big Mom, it could lead to some undesirable results, to say the least, like painting a bigger target on their brother. It would also be pretty interesting to see their baby brother's crew finding out about his mother and them when they reunite and come here. Big Mom after a couple of seconds looked towards Burly. Burly. Said woman raised her head and looked at their mother when she called her. When will you take Luffy to train with Rayleigh? We figured out a schedule. I would bring him back to Amazon Lily so he could train after breakfast, and then he will come back hours before lunch. At this, Big Mom nodded. You should probably go early, finish breakfast and then go, Big Mom suggested, to which Burly agreed to. Alright. Finish your breakfast and go back to your duties and try to be back around lunchtime. Yes, Mama. After everyone was done eating, Burly gestured for Luffy to come with her towards a mirror that was placed around the dining room to enter the mirror world. The siblings stayed to wave them off, but before they reached the mirror, Luffy Montdor called for him, which he responded with a chirp while looking back at him. Are there also strange animals and creatures over there at Amazon Lily? Montdor asked curiously towards him, to which he nodded. Yeah. They are really big and weird. Montdor looked interested in before becoming a bit down. He wanted to see them and write down about them, but with his duties and responsibilities here. Is that so? Montdor said a bit sadly, which Luffy noticed and grinned at him. Wanna come? He asked out of nowhere. Eh? Montdor exclaimed in surprise before turning into a serious look. I can't. I have to stay on this island, Bika. You can go. Huh? Montdor exclaimed surprised before turning to look at his mother, who said that. You can go, you have been working pretty hard, you don't have to worry about your tasks, me and your siblings can handle them. Also try and write a report of what the animals are like at Amazon Lily. At this he widened his eyes before looking at his siblings, who nodded towards him with smiles on their faces before turning back towards his mother and bowed. Thank you, Mama. Make sure to show me what you have found there. Shishishi. Alright. Lead the way, Branch Knee. Luffy exclaimed, grabbing onto Montdor with a stretched arm and dragging him. My name's Burly Knee. Burly screeched with a visible tick mark while her siblings looked on in amusement. Alright. Alright. You can let go now. Montdor sputtered out after being dragged for a bit, which Luffy just laughed at and let go of him. Standing in front a huge mirror, Luffy tilted his head in confusion as to why they were in front of a mirror instead of heading towards the doors. Brulé just smirked in response when she glanced back at her little brother's confused expression before stepping inside the mirror. When Brulé entered the mirror, Luffy was gaping in awe at how she entered a mirror, while Montdor smirked at his brother's reaction in amusement before walking up behind him and patting his back, motioning him to get in, which he eagerly did. Once Montdor stepped in as the last person, the siblings were left alone with their mother. "He sure can rile up Brulé, huh?" Humpit commented, amused with her sisters, and brothers nodded in agreement with her, agreed. "Not only that, he sure is amazed by some of us PROI," and Perispero said with a grin, looking pointedly at Bastard, Poir and Pudding, who warmly smiled, while the others agreed and wondered if their brother would also compliment and praise their unique features. "When he is done with Raylo should spar with him," Cracker said while grinning along with his other sweet commanders. They wanted to see if he had the power to back up the billion Biri bounty on their brother's head. "Demand." Katakuri. Said individuals looked at their mother when she said their names out of the blue. "While you were sailing back, have you found out anything about your brother?" At this both had a soft look, remembering what he did for Brulé before immediately looking grim. "He was tortured." Katakuri said while grimacing and clutching onto his fist. His siblings looked horrified before they had a look of anger. "Who?" Poor simply asked, looking with her eyes narrowed, looking ready to absolutely slaughter the bastard who did. Her little brother, even though they hadn't spent that much time together, had quite an impact on her with how he complimented her teeth and seemed in awe when he looked at them. She felt very happy to know someone raised outside thought positively of her teeth, to think someone would dare torture said person who was so nice. She wasn't the only one though. Amanda had her hand clutching tightly onto her sword, Bastard had visible veins on his head with narrowed eyes, while Pudding looked equally pissed as Poir. "Blue Jam?" The man simply said. "Tamago. Get the information on that bastard, will you?" Big Mom said, eyeing him like a predator. Tamago gulped. "Yes, Bone." He sputtered out and ran off before coming back after a couple of minutes. "Well?" Oven looked at Tamago, arms crossed with a cold look plastered on his face. "Blue Jam is a pirate who is now deceased." TSK. "Well, at least he's dead," Oven said, looking a bit disappointed. He wanted to boil him alive. Big Mom was feeling pretty murderous before compassing herself. "At least he is dead now," and proceeded to move on to another topic. "Tamago. When is Jinbei coming?" "He should be arriving as soon as Luffy-sama comes back, Bone. Then we can discuss negotiations, Swar." "What about Caesar? Any progress?" "None. His asking for more money for funding though, as he stated the research was complex." At this Big Mom frowned but shrugged it off. Gigantification was probably tough to research. She still had thoughts that said to look further into the matter though. As if he was using her money for something else. Big Mom dismissed her children and waited for Jinbei's arrival. She wondered what their candy tasted like. At the mirror world. Once entering, Luffy was in amazement and awe at the fact he seemingly entered a place which seemed to stretch infinitely with mirrors everywhere. "What is this place?" he asked in amazement mixed with curiosity, which had Brulé giggling at. Her siblings when they were still children would always be stunned when she entered a mirror and stuck a hand outside motioning them to come inside, which freaked them out, but upon entering, they would be amazed. Montdor ruffled his hair smiling before explaining. "This is Brulé Ni-san's devil fruit power, the Mirror no Mi. It's a paramecia type devil fruit. She can create and manipulate mirrors to reflect attacks back at her opponents, transform herself and other living things into mirror images of different people, and most importantly, to turn any mirror to a portal towards the mirror world." At this, Luffy looked amazed at what his older sister can do and turned towards her the mirror world. Brulé laughed before further explaining, "Wee. The mirror world is my pocket dimension of sorts. As long as I can fit inside a mirror I can access this place. You notice all these mirrors placed all over the place." At this, Luffy looked around and yeah, it was on the floor, the ceilings and the walls. All of these mirrors lead to the outside world on the other side of the mirrors. Which means you can travel pretty much anywhere as long as there's a mirror. Luffy looked even more amazed. "Really?" Brulé just laughed again before holding onto Luffy's arm and walking towards a random mirror. Stopping in front of it, Luffy saw how the mirror was showing people of different races walking around in streets made seemingly out of food. "If we were to step out of this mirror, we would be outside Mama's castle and out in the streets. The mirror here is outside of a general store," Brulé explained, while Luffy looked amazed and confused. "Why is it there?" Luffy asked. He never really saw mirrors outside of a store unless it was a store that sold mirrors. Montdor had walked towards Luffy's side and explained. "Depending on where the mirror would be, she could send people there that would be perfect for ambush or sneak attacks. Either that or transportation. Mama ordered mirrors to be placed around her islands so she could bring reinforcements if there was ever an attack when she got her devil fruit and displayed her powers." Montdor explained, he would help navigate and plan out which mirror she would use when needed. Oh okay. Alright, let's get you to Rayleigh, Bruley said, walking onwards to the mirror she had placed at Amazon Lily. Lead the way, Branch Nee. Montdor covered his ears with a look of slight amusement upon hearing Branch out of his brother's mouth. My name's Bruley Nee. Luffy just laughed while Bruley walked while grumbling with Montdor behind them amused. Luffy thought about how since his Branch Nee had a devil fruit power. The Luffy turned to Montdor. You can call me Montdor or your Mont Nai, he said, shrugging. That was how he was commonly addressed as by his siblings. Do you also have a devil fruit? Luffy asked to Montdor, who nodded. Yeah. I ate the Boku Boku no Mi. I can manipulate books and can place people under illusions. Not only that, but I can also pin people or animals inside a book and they won't age or get out. Luffy awed at that. Really? Do you got a book with animals or people? Montdor nodded with a proud look on his face. It's in the castle's library. I can show it to you when we come back from your training. To which Luffy nodded at. Here we are. Bruley stopped at a mirror and motioned for Luffy and Montdor to step out of. Exiting the mirror, Montdor looked around the place and noticed how they were surrounded by trees. Seems like the mirror was outside of a forest. Ah. You have arrived. Turning towards whoever said that, Montdor tensed upon seeing him. It was Silver's Rayleigh, the first mate of Roger. So, I take it Luffy finally met his family? Rayleigh asked, looking towards Bruley, who smiled and nodded. Who is this man? Rayleigh asked, now looking at Montdor, who was still tense and wary. This is Mont Nai. He's my older brother. Said man just greeted Rayleigh, who greeted him back. So I heard there's some bizarre animals here or something. Montdor took out a book out of seemingly nowhere with a pen in hand. Rayleigh shrugged before pointing behind, which Montdor followed before looking at what he was pointing at and widening his eyes. There stood several animals that were normal, like snakes, lions, boars and other animals you would normally find in a forest. But they were beyond huge, they seemed to be at least times bigger than normal. But what got his attention were animals that kind of stood out. A giant red elephant and a giant blue gorilla who were duking it out. I have never seen anything like that before, Montdor muttered out before he started writing down his observations and sketching them out in astonishment. Rayleigh now looked at Luffy and handed him a blindfold. Let's get started. Yeah. Hours later. You have dodged a few more times rather than our previous training. Rayleigh exclaimed while looking a bit surprised, his learning faster than he anticipated. Luffy was panting with his hands on his knees with several bumps on his head. Montdor, upon finishing writing and sketching about the animal habitants of Amazon Lily while walking around the jungle and also avoiding getting too close towards the huge mountain, was now focused on his little brother's training. He winced at every hit he got alongside Bruley, who was standing beside him. They wouldn't react much when it came to a sibling getting hurt during spar training back home, but seeing their little brother getting hurt from every strike that didn't came from one of their brothers or sisters was kind of foreign to them. Like watching your sibling from the sidelines getting trained from an instructor and getting their ass handed to them. You are improving quite fast but still got more to go. To which Luffy nodded in agreement. He could slowly start to feel it, but he wasn't there yet. Alright, it's about time you head back at this. Luffy took off his blindfold and thanked Rayleigh for training him. Rayleigh laughed and motioned him to go back to Totto land, to which he did, but not before looking back at Rayleigh. Luffy asked if Rayleigh wanted to join, to which he politely refused and said he would be staying here, to which Luffy nodded at. They then proceeded to walk back towards the mirror leading back home, where Luffy would be reunited with a certain fishman. At Totto land, castle room. Big Mom was sitting on her chair while drinking a cup of tea, waiting patiently for Jinbei to negotiate things out for Fishman Island. She also asked of him to bring him a handful of the candy they produced there. If it tasted good, she would allow them to fly her flag and demand a factory to be made with fair wages towards the employees working there and a reasonable monthly supply of Fishman candy produced from the factory. If the monthly tributes weren't met, as long as there was a good reasoning for it, she would turn a blind eye towards it and demand them to meet the next monthly tribute. She did not want to act like some tyrannical ruler who demanded the unreasonable for them and would send her forces to attack them if they refused, like some kid fussing over how they didn't get their favorite toy. It was one of the many things she changed about herself. Although, she will have Fishman Island even if they refused her offer. When the doors opened, there stood the former Fishman warlord and captain of the Sun Pirates with a giant bag which he dragged with his hand with a serious look on his face. He was dealing with an emperor after all. There sitting down on her throne was Big Mom, a woman who somehow seemingly lost a considerable amount of weight out of the blue and looked like she was in her S despite her age. She was looking down on Jinbei with a judgmental look with a sinister grin. She was trying to study and read what kind of person he is. Ah, Jinbei. So you have come to discuss about the deal, yes? She said, breaking the silence, to which Jinbei nodded at. I take it that you have brought what I asked for, right? Big Mom asked while eyeing the bag he was holding. Yes. Here are the fishman candy. He walked forward and dropped the bag of candy in front of her. Jinbei stepped back when he dropped the giant bag of candy while tensing and was on the ready for the worst situation or outcome. Whitebeard's death was effectively the disbandment of the crew, which also meant the islands that had their flags had their protection stripped away, making them open for attacks. Another emperor providing protection had its pros and cons. If they refused her protection, she may send her forces to attack. If they accept, they might have to meet some harsh terms and policies under her rule. And knowing Big Mom from rumors, they would have to likely provide candy. If the candy was satisfactory, she will provide protection, but demand a copious amount of fishman candy. If she found it unpleasant, they may lose a chance to have protection, which meant they would be open to attacks. Big Mom leaned forward and grabbed a handful of the candy in the bag and consumed them, her eyes widened immediately upon tasting it. It tasted sweet. Big Mom said blissfully. After a few seconds, Big Mom now smiled at Jinbei satisfied. "Ma, these are by far the best candy I have ever tasted," she exclaimed in joy. "Thank you for your praise," Jinbei said while bowing slightly. "So for our alliance I demand a candy factory to be built for mass production." She grinned while taking another handful from the bag and ate it going back in a state of bliss. Jinbei relaxed a bit, the candy proved to be sweet to her, which most likely meant she would want to make an alliance, but would likely need to provide massive amounts of candy. Now all he needed to know was the quantity. "How much candy do you want?" he asked, which had Big Mom thinking with a finger on her chin. "Tons a month," which had Jinbei surprised at. "Tons?" Which Big Mom nodded before changing towards a serious and calculating look. "Tons of fishman candy. Don't worry, we will make sure the factory would be sizable for such mass-scale production. We are willing to even to provide the necessary resources for you to produce them. In addition, we are providing fair wages and benefits for the workers who would be making the candy there." Now at this, Jinbei was surprised. He was just expecting her to ask for them to provide it by any means they could with the factory built, but she took several steps further and even was willing to provide payment and resources for the workers making the candy. "But if you ever try and betray us or not meet the monthly tribute without good reasoning," Big Mom said, daring him for the fishman to do just that under her flag. Jinbei shook his head before looking at her with conviction. We can make the candies with your conditions if we accept." Big Mom laughed in joy at this. "Ma, that's good to hear. But there would also be another condition, but right now I am still thinking about it," Big Mom said, shrugging it off. She needed some way to make sure they won't try anything funny or to effectively seal the deal. "In the meantime, tell Neptune about my demands and contact me if he accepts it. Make sure he knows that if he doesn't accept." Big Mom trailed off menacingly. She didn't want to let this opportunity go with how sweet the candy was. She was going to have their candy either by negotiating or by force. "It will be done. Your demands are very reasonable. You have my gratitude, Big Mom," Jinbei said genuinely. It sounded quite reasonable under those conditions. Big Mom simply smiled in glee. "Good. If I may ask you something," Jinbei said. He wanted to know what she wanted to do with all of that candy. Was she going to eat all that? "What is it? What are you going to do with the candy?" Oh, Big Mom perked up before she smiled warmly, which startled Jinbei. She never displayed such an expression throughout this meeting. "I am going to eat them with my children, of course," she said joyfully. Jinbei was stunned at this. He had heard about how she was a glutton who would send her children to pillage and plunder cooking ingredients and eat candy all by herself, that she was a woman who saw her children as nothing but tools for her own gain, but right now she just simply looked like an affectionate mother who wanted to share candy with her children. "Is that so?" Jinbei struggled to say out. "Yes. Especially my son who came back after being stolen," Big Mom said while piquing Jim's interest at this. "Stolen? There was a child who was missing. The son who was stolen." At this, Big Mom frowned a bit and explained. "My child and son was stolen away from his crib, but we found him and he has come back to his rightful home." This got him more interested, but before he could ask, "We are back," someone said behind him. Jin widened his eyes at the voice. "It can't be," and turned around. And his jaw dropped. There standing before him was Luffy along with other people, a man who looked quite happy and satisfied alongside a woman who was grumbling something about how she wasn't a branch. "Are we interrupting something?" Burly asked, looking at Jinbei and Big Mom. "No, it has already ended." "Luffy-kun, what are you doing here?" Jinbei asked, looking at Luffy surprised. "Why is he here of all places? Shouldn't he be training with Rayleigh back at Amazon Lily?" "Oh. Jinbei. Nice to see again," Luffy exclaimed, waving at him while eyeing the bag lying in front of their mother. The Charlottes in the room wondered what kind of relationship Jinbei had towards Luffy, he was there with him at Marineford. And what's in the bag? Luffy asked, walking forward towards them and looking at the bag before his mother took out a bunch of candies from it and handing it out to him. Fishman candy. You should try some. At this, Luffy perked up and took the candy from her hands and ate it. His eyes turned into stars sweet. Big Mom laughed at that. "Ma, glad you like it, my son." Jinbei froze and was processing this. "Oh? What's going on?" Burly asked, walking forward with Montour beside her, equally curious and standing by their little brother's side while eyeing their mother's hand, holding what seems to be candy. "It's Fishman candy. Here, try some." At this, she had their interest and they took the candy from her hand and ate it, and similar to their mother, they were in bliss. "Sweet." Which had her laughing again. "This is really good." Luffy exclaimed while both of his older siblings and their mother, who took another handful and ate it, were in bliss, nodding in agreement. "So, what were the animals like there, my child?" Big Mom asked, looking at Montour, who was holding onto a book. "They were really interesting," he said while smiling. He was glad to tag along with his brother and witness the bizarre animals there and write and sketch about them. "Tell me about them at the library, will you?" Montour nodded at his mother. "Yes, Mama." Montour grinned, looking at Luffy. "I can't wait to show you the collection." "Yeah?" Luffy nodded, smiling at him, looking forward to it. Jinbei had several questions and thoughts going through his head. Were the rumors false? He had heard from people on how cruel and cold she was towards her subjects and even towards her own children. But here she was sharing candy with her children while having a friendly conversation with her son. And then theirs was Luffy. At this, they all looked at Jinbei, who seemed to be trying to wrap his head around what he was witnessing. "What's wrong, Jinbei?" Luffy asked, tilting his head towards said man alongside his mother, also questioning why he seemed shocked before realizing and snorting, "Oh yeah, he didn't know." Jinbei raised his hand and pointed at Luffy. "Our Big Mom's son." Luffy nodded before pointing at the giant woman sitting on her throne, who smirked in amusement at the fishman's reaction. "She's my mom." Jinbei looked at Big Mom, who nodded, then he looked at the man with the skeleton suit and the tall woman, who also nodded with a look of amusement while munching on candy. He then looked at Luffy, who was staring at him innocently and curiously, and then he blinked a couple of times to process this. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Psychotic-Tomato for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.